Goodfellows Conversation Guide. This is from LinkedIn. I've picked up from LinkedIn. This is status update of December 6th, 2025. From by Hoover Institution, Stanford University. Today, this is 26th November 2025. I last week for a special Thanksgiving episode of Goodfellows, Senior Fellows, John Cochrane, H.R. McMaster, and Neil Ferguson, and joined distinguished policy fellow Bill Whalen to answer questions submitted by viewers and listeners from six continents. This conversation guide breaks down some of the key movements in this episode and highlights several of the Goodfellows' main points in policy, as well as reading recommendations. Since this was a viewer mail episode, the discussion covered an even wider range of topics than usual. Questions included: is the US proposal Russia-Ukraine war peace plan good for Ukraine or Munich-style appeasement? Will there be peace in Ukraine? And 2026 in Cold War II, will China, unlike the Soviet Union in the 1980s, have enough economic resources to reach and sustain parity with the United States? Is there such thing as an ideal interest rate? What would you say to young people who do not want to have children because of climate change? How do the good fellows manage to read so many books and write so many articles? How have the good fellows' views on vaccine changed since 2021? What is your favorite Thanksgiving memory and our tradition, and why? Viewers and are invited to submit questions for future Goodfellows mailbag episode using this form. Now let us dive into the episode. Quote of the day: viewer wonders whether economic prosperity in China can continue to advance in the absence of political freedom. Resident grumpy economist John Cochrane responds: there is nothing as good as a good king, then there is nothing as bad as a bad king. So many of our ancestors spent entire lives waiting for the king to die. I think it remains true that in the long run, you cannot be prosperous without freedom, both political and economic. The central issue Russia, Ukraine, and the US. At the top of the snow show, Neil, John, and HR discuss the current trade status of negotiations taking place among the United States, Ukraine, and Russia. Ukraine, Russia. And to end the war, Russia started by reinvading Ukraine in 2022. Neil Ferguson argues that the negotiation of compromise peace is not something that is preferable to Russia granting our victory, which is something conceivable. It is hard for me to imagine winning the war after nearly 4 years. So compromise peace is a good for outcome and one that we should pay for. HR McMaster maintains that the original version of the recently leaked 28-point plan was throwing Ukraine under the bus. It was odious, in my view, to present that as a US plan when it was clearly authored in Moscow. But McMaster also praises Secretary of State Marco Rubio for making clear in the recent days that the intransigent party in the negotiation is Moscow. The aggression in this war, following a discussion of the publicly known details of the current peace plan, Bill Whelan asked his colleagues for their bottom line. Will there be peace in Ukraine, Russia in 2026? McMaster, no, there won't be. And the reason there won't be, even if there is a ceasefire. Russia will continue the war through subversion and other means, use of unconventional forces. This war already, the hot war, was gone in since 2014. Putin will not stop until he is physically stopped or concludes that he cannot continue his aggression at an acceptable cost and risk. And I think the soccer will sooner we recognize that the better. I will go with no. There may be a ceasefire. The Ukrainians want their country. They want to be part of the Europe. They want to be part of the civilized world. There is not going to be give up on that quickly, and neither is Putin going to give up. Putin cannot survive and the end to this war. Go as so he is every season to keep going as well. The Europeans may well stand up. This is now Europeans' war. Ferguson, I am going to disagree respectfully with my colleagues. I think this represents the beginning of the end of the war, because the cost to Putin of continuing this war is starting to look dauntingly high. And remember, he is also awakened the sleeping giant of Germany, which is now rearming. I think there will be a peace and next year. Certainly not this week, more this year or this year. I think it will be compromise peace. I think there will be many parts of this world of that will it be painful for Ukraine to accept. But Ukraine needs peace. It needs a security guarantee and it needs an agreement that upholds its sovereignty. And all of these things now seem to be on the negotiating table. So I am more positive than you gentlemen. Former National Security Advisor in Germany, in General McMaster, gets the last word, noting that the answer to Wellen question ultimately depends on define how do you define peace. If you define peace as just signing a document, maybe that will happen. But I don't think Russia will stop in its various forms of aggression. May be forms of aggression that fall below the interest threshold in or what elicit concerted response irritated them. Few takeaways. Can China compete against US in Cold War? I think it will become increasingly apparent in the next 10 years that an enormous economic system that is predicated in one party rule by a party that is above the law with no private property rights that the party respects and no representative government, no accountability has to and will fall. The way it falls, we can begin to discuss in the collapsing properly property market, the collapsing fertility rate, the excessive debt burden, and the increasingly manic efforts of the regime to keep the show on the road by mass producing, manufacturing, and dumping in manufactured goods on the rest of the world. So I can see a kind of 10-year path to zero growth. The deflationary path is already at work. I'll stop it here. There are much more articles in there. Much more articles there. I'll stop here. I'll share the article. Thank you. Thank you so much for listening to me. Thank you.